but I am steadfast in my belief that he will endure as well through the sincerity in which he performed his work. This charter measure 26-228 that we're here to discuss today would have animated, and further, he would have urged both the proponents and the vocal opponents to come together for a shared solution to make Portland better. My last conversation with Lynn was like my first conversation with Lynn. He spoke to his family with love, from his wife Betsy to his son David striving to win the Senate, to his grandkids, to his recent trip to the coast. He talked about the state of politics, and I mean from the top to the bottom of the ticket, both locally and nationally. And one thing that he always did, he complimented me on my staff at the Coalition of Communities of Color and building power for communities of color. That team worked tirelessly on 26-228 and a few other things, but he loved Jenny Lee of my staff, he loved Saul Mora, he loved Robin Yee, and you'll hear from Robin later, but you know, he just loved the young thinking minds, the architects of this measure and other races, and he was always engaged and always current. So I wind up, he was this little hokey, but he was the quintessential student and the quintessential teacher of humanity with the quintessentially human touch, a very kind man. Whenever you encountered that mischievous smile and that forever goatee that he had, you knew you were in for a good conversation. So I will miss him, and I will miss him more. Thank you, Saul and MJCC, for allowing me to say a few words about my colleague and friend, Lynn Bergstein. Thank you to Nell for letting me talk, and the world has lost a real bitch. So, thank you.
Thank you, Len. David Yaden. Thank you, Marcus. That really captured Len. The Len that I first met in 1974 when he ran the campaign for governor in the Democratic primary of the late Betty Roberts, and then moved on to become part of the campaign and staff for Robert Straub when he was elected governor. My first meeting of Len, but it continued thereafter. Len and I had offices next to each other. I don't get to tell this story very often. In the office of the Secretary, U.S. Secretary of Transportation, Neil Goldschmidt, in 1979. And Len spent a lot of time at the White House. None of us could ever quite figure out exactly what Len did, but somehow we knew that the relations between the Department of Transportation and the White House remained pretty good, which was saying something in those days. Len never went to the White House without coming back with some memento. Sometimes it was just a matchbook, sometimes it was an ashtray, sometimes it was a portrait, sometimes it was something. But I will always remember that Len came back full of smiles, explaining his latest catch from the White House. Over the years, Len remained a good friend, a good citizen, a good man, a real contributor to this community. I'm going to be sorry.
Thank you, David. It is now my pleasure to invite up Shane Dixon Kavanaugh, who covers Portland City government and politics for the Oregonian / Oregon Live, to moderate the panel.
Hello, everyone. It's a real honor to be invited to moderate a discussion on an issue that I can't imagine to be more consequential than any other in sort of recent Portland history. So thank you all for allowing me to be up here this afternoon to help moderate this discussion. I want to thank MJCC for putting on this event, and Danelle and Saul for inviting me, and for our panelists who are going to, help us have a real, I think, instructive and informative and engaging conversation on this transformative measure to change our century-old form of government and election system. So I'm going to quickly sort of introduce our three panelists. And so we'll start here with David Yaden. David is currently retired and was very active for decades in the political and civic arenas. His experience includes, but is not limited to, research assistant to syndicated columnist, author, and pioneering reporter of public opinion Sam Bell, legislative assistant to a U.S. Senator, chief of staff to a U.S. Congressman, special assistant to U.S. Secretary of Transportation Neil Goldschmidt, as David mentioned just now, director of the Oregon Department of Energy, executive director for policy and planning at TriMet, and David has also published the blog Shouting Match about the arena of politics, governance, and public opinion. Next, we unfortunately weren't able to have Commissioner Carmen Rubio here this afternoon. It sounds like she's a bit under the weather, as have been a lot of other folks in the last week or so. But in her place, we do have Shoshana Oppenheim from the city of Portland. Shoshana is a strategic projects and opportunities team manager, and more important to this conversation, she's going to be managing the charter implementation transition team within the office of the chief administrator. Shoshana's had 15 years in public service, leading projects citywide and of statewide significance. She worked for former Mayor Sam Adams as a transportation policy manager and led transportation policy projects for PBOT, and served as the city's first civil rights program manager. And last, but certainly not least, we have Robin Yee to my far right. Robin resides in St. John's and currently works as chief of staff for Representative Tom Pham, who was actually my state rep until this election cycle because of redistricting, but I live out in Montevilla, so I know Representative Pham quite well. He served for 2 years on the Portland Charter Review Commission and was most recently a senior advisor and field director for the Portland Unite for Change Yes on Measure 26228 campaign. He has also worked as a consultant with Building Powers for Communities of Color, which is sort of the 501c4 or political arm for the Coalition of Communities of Color. He is active in Oregon politics and passionate about democracy reform to achieve greater representation in our democracy. So we're going to kick off this discussion now. I would sort of just like to open it up to our panelists. I have a few sort of open-ended questions. What I'm hoping is that the three of you can sort of engage amongst each other and sort of riff off of one another as we dive into this discussion, but I might jump in occasionally with some clarifying or follow-up questions, or just maybe spice things up a little bit, though not too spicy. So just to sort of begin this discussion on this historic change to the city's charter, I was hoping that each of the panelists, and I think we're going to start with Robin here, could sort of reflect, just broadly speaking, on the results from last Tuesday on this particular measure and the outcomes of charter reform. I'd love to hear your sort of post-election thoughts.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you everyone for being here, and for Bill for putting on this event. I'm excited about the results. I think that what was great is for 2 years we had so many people engaged in this process to think about what would a different or better form of government look like for the city, right? And I think it's testament to that kind of policy making, right? That's led by residents of the city, that's staffed wonderfully by Shoshana and her team, and the city supported to do that outreach, so that when it came to the campaign, there was such great information out there about what this would look like, right? Questions were asked from proponents of it was a great discussion that we were a part of for the campaign cycle and beyond. And I think that resulted in every part of the city, every quadrant, every corner had majority support for this, right? It wasn't just carried by any particular part of the city. There was wide support. Over 80% of the precincts went for yes, Measure 2628. So I think that's just great that there's so many people who did really think about democracy and what our future is going to look like and want to buy into this, radical, as Jane calls it, this big transformation, this big structural change. So that's what I'm really excited about.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to introductions where people aren't taking a breath and like, Shoshana, she's going to manage the transition.
No pressure.
No pressure at all. So, what I'm really excited about, exactly what Robin spoke about. We are in a new phase of this work. For 2 years, we've been working alongside the charter commissioners in their work and helping and supporting their work. And now we actually get to implement the will of the voters. There is no better poll than an election. So we very much know what is in the hearts and minds of Portlanders. They want to see change. They want to see reforms to the way that they elect their city government or elect their representatives. They want to see change in the way we are doing business. So it's on us, the city, to deliver that change and to really lift up the voices of community while we're doing that. Of course, our work will center the Charter Commission and our city core values. And so I'm really excited about the opportunities for the future for the city of Portland. And we can build it differently, and we can build it better, and we can center our community in our work in a way that our existing form, or the commission form, really didn't allow us to work across bureaus and to work across the city to deliver what Portlanders expected. So that's what I'm excited about.
Thank you. Can you hear me without? Okay, I prefer to speak without it, if I may. I'm going to dissent a little bit from several of the things here, but first of all, acknowledge 58%, 80% of the precincts voting in favor of this change. I'm going to dissent a little bit on whether that job is now done or whether there is still some unfinished business, not in the transition, which we know is to happen, but what I'm going to call the civic dysfunction that I think besets this community. The divisions, the irresolution, the citizen unhappiness, and question whether what we have accomplished so far helps really solve that or merely sets the stage for what might come next. First of all, understand that I spend a lot of time talking and writing about the health and capacity of our civic infrastructure, by which I mean both the public and private organizations, institutions, people, processes, neighborhood groups, advocacy groups, education, foundations, everybody that's involved in having some kind of a voice in deciding the broad directions that the community takes. The capacity we have to find something that constitutes a shared division and frankly allows us to do a better job than we have done on houselessness, public safety, affordable housing, equitable representation, all of those broad issues. And I'm going to question whether what we have done is now just get on with the transition or whether there's unfinished business left to do. I particularly will question from 60 years of doing work in public opinion whether in fact this poll or this election result tells us exactly what voters want. I will tell you from having read the bulletin on this and looked at as much as I can at the focus group reports and others things that voters wanted change. Did they want this specific change? And if you walk out on the street and ask people who voted for it, did you know that you had just voted for these things? Now, none of this is to take away from the passage of the measure. It's just a caution that we should take this as an opening, not a closure in terms of resolution of some specific issues. I think there's no question but what we have specific work yet to do in terms of what I call the civic divisions, the civic dysfunction in front of us. I ran some correlations on the vote for newly elected Commissioner-elect Gonzalez and the charter, and found that there was a very strong correlation between vote for Commissioner Gonzalez and opposition to the charter. Now that doesn't, again, take away from anything, just indicates that that division is still out there. I think there are two specific pieces of unfinished business that relate to the charter specifically. One is the understanding among the citizenry, not just about ranked choice voting, but about the use of what is called single transferable vote in a proportional representation multi-member district, which is a mouthful, is not understood. It's important that we not revisit that in any electoral sense or anything like that, but make sure that people understand how this actually works. The other thing, and I hope we can get into this a little bit more, is I am myself concerned that because of the focus of this campaign on who gets a seat at the table, the focus on representation, we haven't spent enough time talking and considering what happens when we all are at the table. The issue of governance and effectiveness of government and accountability. In particular, that comes down to the role of the mayor. And I'm just going to leave it with this single thought about that. With the adoption of this measure, Portland is now among the 40 largest cities in the country. We're about number 25. Among all 40, Portland will be the only city where we do not have a mayor who either sits on the council and has a vote, or maybe doesn't have a vote, but at least sits on the council and has some voice on the council, or, and often, and has a veto. Our mayor will have no role on the council. Our mayor will have no veto. No other city is in that large city in the top 40 is in that situation. That got almost no attention during this campaign. For reasons that I hope we can talk about a little bit more, I think that's something we want to at least leave the door open just a crack to talk about. So that's where I'm going to go on.
Thank you, David. And Robin or Shoshana, would love to see if, David just covered a lot there, but if there's anything specific that you wanted to respond to with some of his comments.
Quite an opener. You said a lot. I think that, I think this transition is the beginning. I think we continue the conversation that we've already been having since 2020, right? The public outreach through the Charter Commission, all of that. So I think, again, this goes back to something this monumental takes a whole team effort, all parts of the city, all people involved, and we're continuing that. We very much see it as that, right? I think that the folks on the Charter Commission that voted 17-3 to refer this, and then more than 58% of Portlanders are asking for that opportunity to imagine something different, right? So comparisons to other places, exactly in the U.S., I think voters did chime in and say, yeah, these things might be unfamiliar to us, but that doesn't make it not right for Portland. Some of the best things that we love about our elections, like vote by mail, which is catching fire across the country, that started here in Oregon. That was unfamiliar at one time, but now it is the gold standard, right? So I think that that's what the opportunity is. You know, as a charter commissioner, when we were doing this work, I think what really opened up possibilities was hearing not just, you know, here's what these cities are doing, here's what these cities are doing, pick one. They said, well, let's think about Portland, let's think about this opportunity, right? When we're at our lowest, we're most willing to change. And I think, that was reflected also in the election. And so people want to see this measure that we passed be successful. I think, you know, I would contend with your point that how could we have an effective government if not everyone is at the table, right? I don't see those as, how could you split that, right? So anyone who's like, oh, you're worried about representation, but not efficiency and effectiveness. Like, how can you have a true democracy where there aren't all people at that table? We're not trying to erase what people think in the city. We're trying to represent it in government and then let the government, our elected representatives, do that work of figuring out compromise and figuring out solutions that work for their district, the whole city. I think that's actually closer to what we would hope is the function of government, to solve problems. And that requires having more than 5 people at the seat, or at the table. And then for the mayor, mayor has a key role. They're the single figure that has all the media attention. They have the largest staff. That will continue to be the case going forward. They have direct access to bring policies and propose the budget. Those are huge, huge pieces. Like, you will always know what the mayor thinks about any particular policy, I guarantee you, right? Like, you will know. They will come in to cast tie-breaking votes so that decisions can be made and move forward. I think that's efficient. You know, ultimately, what we heard from over 2 years worth, both in the campaign and the Charter Commission, folks didn't want a mayor with overreaching powers. They didn't want a mayor that could veto the majority will of elected representation, right? So if you gave a mayor a veto, you're saying any 5 members of a 12-member council could be the majority each time, right? They could block what a majority opinion of 7 or 8, like what they think, and people didn't want to see that, and so that wasn't included. So, you know, what remains to see how the mayor interacts. Yeah, those are good questions. How will city council interact? That's a great question, right? I think we're all thinking about that. But to start, I think there's a lot of opportunity, and we're thinking about what fits Portland, not just the other top 40 cities. You know, there's not a secret recipe. If there was, I'm sure it was that we would have adopted it, right? If there was like, this is the number you need, this is the exact job description to have a utopian city, I'm pretty sure we would have went for that.
Thank you. I agree with both of you that it's great that I'm in the middle, I guess. But we are really just beginning the conversation on the transition. You know, we had a lengthy and very engaged conversation about what the proposal should look like, and now we are moving into what does the transition look like. So, we are absolutely investing in continuing that conversation. Ways that you can be involved in that conversation is through both the Independent District Commission, which will be appointed in January to define the districts in Portland. So we're going to have 4 geographic districts. We're going to need Portlanders to participate in that process and help us get that right. We're also going to have a Charter Transition Advisory Committee. This is a very important group that is going to be advising the CAO on how to implement the transition. There are things that are prescribed that are in the charter. There are a lot of things that are not prescribed in the charter, and they shouldn't be, because they're not part of our Constitution. They're policy decisions. They're things that belong either in code or in policy administrative rules. So there's many ways that we govern our city. The charter is just one piece. It is our foundational document. So this is what's in our foundational document. There's going to be a code review where we're reviewing all of our code to make sure that we're in alignment with our charter and updating that so it's in line with the new with the amendments. and that will include the community in that work. So we absolutely are just beginning the conversation about transition. You are absolutely right. Voter education is going to be continually important. Whether we look back at the example that Robin gave of vote by mail, changing your election methods, how you interact with your ballot, it will require us to invest in teaching our community, in learning from our community, how to communicate best about how we can use this new opportunity. And, you know, quite frankly, I'm excited about the opportunity. I mean, there have been many things that Portland has been a leader on. Right now, this is one of those places where Portland can be a leader in democracy. We have some challenges ahead of us in terms of our reputation. But this is a place where if we all come together, we can really, really lead and show the rest of the country, show the world what we're made of here in Portland.
So, this is yes. So one thing I'm sort of thinking about this discussion, and might want to start with David on this one because you kind of brought it up. That you suggested in your opening remarks that many Portlanders may or may not have known precisely what kind of change they were voting for. And if whether or not that's the case, I mean, I'm just sort of thinking about the fact that we had 2 campaigns with passionate advocates on both sides having a very robust discussion. We had more than $1 million spent between both sides to promote their ideas and try to put this ballot measure front and center, in the public sphere. So moving ahead, this issue, I'm curious if people on this panel have thoughts on if that was not an effective way, or if people were not sufficiently educated on this issue, how can the city and advocates outside of City Hall do a better job of increasing sort of engagement, education, on this issue moving forward? If, again, 2 rival campaigns and $1 million wasn't enough.
A very quick response. In the field of public opinion and democracy, there's something called settled public judgment. That consists of the sense you get when something has rolled around out there in the public over time in enough places. People have kicked the tires, they thought about it, they've had second thoughts, but over time something becomes so settled that you can say, yes, we have come to public judgment, not just an election decision, but public judgment about it. I submit that we don't know at all yet whether we're close to that, and yet we are embarking on a very, very bold, and I think hopeful, I'm very hopeful for this. I'm particularly hopeful for those aspects of it that deal with more equitable, broader representation. I personally am fine with a larger city council. My worry is about the imbalance where we so strengthen the city council and to some extent the city manager, and so at the time weaken the mayor, that hasn't really settled in. I mean, I don't think throughout this campaign, and frankly, this was a very short time. If you're asking how to, is a campaign like that sufficient to come to public judgment about something like this? And I would say, well, we better be a little cautious about that. It reminds me of what happened in 1990 when the voters enacted property tax reform against lots of arguments about here are the consequences and why this will be bad. They didn't care. They just had it with property tax increases. It was a protest vote. And I'm saying we ought to be a little cautious about assuming we come to public judgment about all this here. And that's the answer on that. By the way, I do think it's time for us to really revisit how we do public engagement on issues such as this. I think we're way behind in terms of understanding the limitations of using hearings and other things as means, and short campaigns. Frankly, I would have been much happier had we had 2 or 3 years to let this question, some of these questions, kind of roll around out there. So again, that's my take.
Yeah, this is just me going off of David on this event. So, look, I mean, like, I feel that, yes, we passed this measure in 2022. Folks know that it's going to take a few years to implement, and then we will judge the merits of this system starting 2025. I think that's very well known. But the standard can't be that a week after the election, because it's not, civic judgment is there. Like, you know, the Affordable Care Act took 10 years and like 5 tribes to repeal it. Now it's the law of the land, no one touches it, right? Not even the folks who went after it, you know. I don't know why that's the new standard to put on a very, very overwhelming election result that is a margin greater than the margins that our city councilors have won, right? So like, are we repudiating their elections, you know, in retrospect? It's just like, that's not how elections work. And I actually do feel that this ballot measure, because it did start as a public process in November of 2020, 2 years ago, and continues on through the through the transition team, through these oversight committees. This is an example of that change in outreach and how we solicit public opinion. I think this is an example of we should be moving towards this type of model. You know, the campaigns, short, long campaign, it was just the campaign length that is instructed. I mean, all ballot measures in the city, across the state, all the elections we all just weighed in on are on the same timeline. So I don't think that's a fair saying that, like, oh, it was too short and therefore these results shouldn't be taken seriously like that. Again, every part of the city voted overwhelmingly. We had not only the campaigns giving out information about this, but we had the city produce 6 progress reports, also nonpartisan resources all throughout. Like, I name one other kind of democracy measure that had this much coverage and this much information about it, right, for a city. Like, you know, you can't find one that has even more comprehensive. So like, is there more to do? Absolutely. By the standards that we have, this was an overwhelming push to let people know what's happening. And we'll continue to evaluate it, right? I'm very interested and excited and hope that if we see problems or if we see better things we could do, that we don't wait another 120 years to change something, right? This is the 9th try to change our charter and we were successful. I think that in itself is a very good piece of evidence that this was a good effort. This failed 8 times, right? As recently as 2007. There's a reason why it got done this time, and I think it's because of the work that we did.
I almost can't remember where we started in this conversation or this question, but I think that the thing that I would highlight is what I'm hearing you say is a lot of concern about the role of the mayor. And having worked in a mayor's office, having worked in city council offices, having worked under a variety of different mayors, there's a lot of ways that you can define strength. And a lot of that is on your policy initiatives, your purpose, and what you bring to the office. And I think that we are going to attract keen thinkers who are driven by policy direction and are executives. And that's what they're going to serve as. And to minimize the role of an executive mayor, it's like ignoring an important part that our current mayor and other council members play when they are the leaders over their bureaus, they have a lot of discretion. There's a lot of work that goes through policy direction, administrative rules, all of that leadership rolls up to the mayor. And if anything, it's concentrating more authority in our elected office, in our mayor. And so I hope that you're wrong on that, and that we are really attracting folks who want to make a difference to that office, because I think that that office has the opportunity to reshape how we do business in the city.
Just quickly, I feel like I took us down a rabbit hole that got a little too,
I think that's okay with this.
with too much into the kind of some things that were left out of clause and whatever with the measure. I'm very hopeful about this. I really want to concentrate more on kind of the larger civic question about whether we can use this as an opportunity to re-engage. And for example, like opponents, I heard over and over from them, this is too complicated, they're trying to change too much, representation is not an issue. I think they were flat out wrong with that. I think that was one of the major accomplishments of this charter review commission. But how do we then get those folks back together by saying, we hear you, those are real issues. Let's use this as a platform to begin to deal with those, not just in transition. On the mayor, we could go on and on about this, but I'll just leave it with this. Two quick conversations as soon as this the measure was proposed. One from a former governor, one from a former mayor of Portland. Both of them said, who would want this job where I don't sit on the council, I don't have a voice on the council, I can't even veto anything if they want to pass something. And it just, and second and last, what I said before, we're the only city. We're the only large city that's going this route. That for me is just, could we even just kind of keep the door open on that issue?
So throughout the last 6 months or so of covering this proposal, I have, as a reporter at the Oregonian, I have had the opportunity and the honor to speak with commission members, including Robin and others, in great depth and at great length about the intricacies of the various components of this proposal and how they saw all of them sort of fitting together. Now, some of that discussion has come out in stories that I've published over time, but in case it's, in case there is still some confusion or questions about that, I was wondering if, Robin, if you want to take a minute or two to sort of articulate the sort of grander, how the decision to create the type of mayor-council structure the commission came up with and how you all see it ultimately working to the better of Portland.
Yeah, absolutely. Where to begin? So I do think that, the Charter Commission was trying to create a system of a politics of inclusion, right? So no longer are we thinking about, what one person can represent the entire city, and that's it. A coalition that will form to get 50% plus one. But saying, now we can have multiple issues being litigated in an election. We can have multiple perspectives represent the same area, and therefore we have more coverage of all the different issues that Portlanders really care about, right? Which may be different depending on geography, or there might be issues that unify people across the city. And so with more seats, we also are lowering barriers for people to throw their hat in the ring to run on what they understand of their neighborhood or what they understand of climate or housing, right, or public safety. So it's more things are kept in contest, and then people don't have to feel like they have to say what one person represents all the viewpoints that I have, which is very, very hard to find. Like, let alone I myself don't know what I think about some things anyway, right? Like, how am I going to find someone that correctly captures all of that? So we wanted to, right, say let's utilize the best of Portland, more minds into focusing on policy, And then, people wanted guarantees of geographic representation. And so I think as things come online, as we have our election and head into government, I think the kind of politics of cooperation, of saying, even if you are a minority voice, whether that's ideology, economic background, race, whatever, right? That you have a concrete shot at getting representation on the council. Does that mean that your viewpoint is going to prevail in the council votes, in the public engagement? No, but that's what democracy is, right? Where the viewpoints are accurately represented, and then you build a coalition in government to pass the thing that works for the public, right? That works for all the districts. I think we have even more balance now between saying there are parts of the city that deal with different things. That voice is really going to be strong. That's what people ask for. And also, because the councilors are now working on a budget together, we have a mayor, and all the city services are unified under a single professional administrator, we can also have a much clearer, holistic picture of how these things are affecting the entire city. Like, there's more balance, there's more opportunities for people to engage. I think it's going to be great. I think there's going to be a lot more opportunity, and that's what we want to create, opportunity.
And I think we have time for one more question that I'm going to ask, and then I believe we're going to have some time to open it up for questions from the audience here. But I wanted to just direct this one at Shoshana. So I was at a press conference last week that you and other city officials were hosting, and you didn't really mince words during that press conference, essentially saying, we've got our work cut out for ourselves, because we have 2 years from now to completely restructure Portland's form of government and create and run an entirely new election system here in the city as well. And in my time covering Portland City Hall, that in that 2-year time period, much smaller projects have not gotten off the ground in the city. I could name 3 or 4 just off the top of my head. I won't right now. But how can you, what sort of assurances can you bring to the people here, or just the public in general, that this is something that the city is prepared to effectively implement in such a short period of time?
Well, thank you for the question. I think, just to be perfectly clear and transparent, that we have some very key milestones. We're driving towards those milestones. We've already started towards those milestones with launching the Independent District Commission. They have to complete their work by September of next year. We are committed to making that happen by resourcing that group, by staffing that group, and ensuring that they're able to carry out the expectations and as written in the charter. We have to have ranked choice voting by the 2024 election. We are already in conversation with the county about how to implement that work. They are also on their own journey with ranked choice voting. We have the opportunity to bring the best and brightest minds on ranked choice voting to Portland and Multnomah County to work on this issue, to be an area where we lead on. This is absolutely within our reach. It's not like, there's no path forward on this. It's very clear. Ranked choice voting, working with our county partners, Multnomah, Clackamas, Washington, making sure that every Portlander has the opportunity to participate in ranked choice voting in the 2024 election. Ensuring that the council, the candidates for council know what their job description is going to be when they are going to, if they're going to run for office. So ensuring that they have the systems in place. This is, it's not, I'm not minimizing it, but there are very clear milestones that we need to be meeting. And we will be talking with the community, and you will be keeping us on track. You will be holding us accountable, and we will be working to be transparent in our efforts. So that said, how do I assure the public and the people in this room that we're doing the work? Because we are committed to this work. We already have a commitment from City Council to fund this work in the budget monitoring process. We'll develop a plan for resources in the next fiscal year, and you will see our work, and that's how we'll gain your trust.
Questions from the audience? Piper.
Thanks, Al. I think we might be missing the bigger point here. I was thrilled and happy that such a complex issue passed. I don't know that people were so incredibly concerned about ranked choice voting, whether they wanted regional representation, whether they wanted to change the city council to a legislative body, whether they wanted a city manager. There's many different aspects to it. I don't think people really understood that, as you mentioned. I think what this really was a mandate against the city that doesn't work. And I think that's the point that you need to take home. And I think a lot of people, I think most taxpayers are rather fed up with the fact people that don't pay any property taxes seem to have better served and get to do whatever they want, while taxpayers are incredibly fed up, and some of them moving out of town, downtown vacancies going up, and moving their offices out of the county. What is going to work here so that the city becomes more responsive to the needs, and so many of the bureaus, instead of doing whatever the heck they want to do without any citizen input, start to become more effective? And I think that's what we want, is the city that actually serves the people. You think this is going to start to happen?
Yeah, great question. So I think that responsiveness to Portlanders, right, and the issues they're facing. I think that one really tangible thing that I'm really excited about, and I think Portlanders will be excited about, is our investments into bringing the city not just in the west side downtown, but into the vast parts of the city. So we're going to have 4 district offices in the districts that are created. That's going to be game-changing, right? So that your ability to interact with your government isn't determined by your distance to, the civic square here in downtown, right? Like, you'll have 3 district reps, increasing your chances at least one of them really understands your position, right, or the thing that you're dealing with, or might even live close to your block, right? So those interaction points, I think, are worth investing. I'm really excited to see that. Our council chambers, even downtown, will change to be more inclusive, to be open, because there's more representatives there. I think that, the fact that we have eliminated one of the election cycles in Portland is like an underrated thing, right? So we have more time to focus on issues and governance before the election, looking behind your shoulder, right, where you're thinking about your re-election. I just think those are all really critical pieces that will lift up the responsiveness between government and its people.
And to answer your question about the city working better now, we don't have time to wait until 2025 for us to work better. The conversations that I'm in with our elected officials, they are committed to the problems that Portland is facing right now. And so I think that what they took away from the election is that exactly what we've all discussed today, is that we want to see Portland working better and smarter and addressing the problems that we're facing. Does the charter amendments give us an additional tool to do that? I think so, but it's not lost on City Council, and it's not lost on my colleagues, that we have to be doing more right now. So we are both building Portland's future while trying to address these intractable challenges that have been facing Portland.
Hi, thank you. My question is if you're taking the average citizen here, they're looking at the crime. Yeah, closer. So if you look at the crime skyrocketing, and not all of us are Portlanders by birth. I grew up on the East Coast in Baltimore, Maryland. I saw what happened in a really fine city and kind of unraveled. And the last thing we want to see is Portland become a major East Coast or Midwestern city where it just has terrible criminal crime problems. And, you know, I understand the concept of protecting people of color, but at the same time, a lot of the victims of what's going on are people of color. So my question is, what are we doing with, if you're looking at the average citizen, they're saying, do I vote for this, do I not vote for this? At the end of the day, how are things going to improve that there's greater police presence, that there's more safety and security? If you don't have safety and security, that's those hierarchy of needs, then you can put everything else aside. And right now, it's not that Portland is Baltimore, Maryland, and Washington, D.C., but it's headed in that direction. And because of some of that management of not giving, I mean, I think a lot of these things were avoidable, and I just see it. I work at Intel, but I'm also a property manager. I see tons and tons of tents, especially people in the east side, unincorporated districts where the police won't even go down pound division 100 or something. And these people are suffering, and the police have no power to do anything to help them. So what are we going to do to make those changes? How's this change going to improve the safety and security of this? This is especially everywhere, especially in those, you know, lower income neighborhoods.
Sure. You know, I don't know what happens in the next 2 years. That's up to council. But who would like to counsel? As it relates to charter, some things that I can theorize is with the move from, you know, executive commissioners who manage bureaus, right? Somebody manages a police one, and then there's a lot of like, you know, territorial fighting and budgets and stuff. When those commissioners move to a council, we have legislative oversight. With 12 people, you can have a standing police or public safety committee, similar to what we see in like Oregon State, right, in Salem, right, where you constantly have elected representatives checking in, providing oversight on police conduct or public safety or community safety, right? The police chief in the new system is one of the positions that will be nominated by the mayor and confirmed by the full council, meaning that every elected will weigh in and have a viewpoint or, you know, a policy idea of what police and public safety will have to look like in the city, right? So there's that accountability piece for the elected, right? There's policy oversight. More policies can move, right? In 2020, we passed as a city the police oversight committee, right? Or I forgot the exact name, the independent oversight, right? We don't have to do that via ballot measure anymore when we have a council that can move more rapidly on these kind of procedures, right? They created that committee via the ballot because they could not break through that disagreement or that deadlock about what to do around policing, right? So that was the reaction, and then we've had to wait a few years for it to build. I don't think that's gonna, or I think we've really lowered the chances that that's the case in the next form of government in 2025. So I'm hopeful that there'll be more responsiveness, faster engagement, a place that all of us could tune in to that committee that's focused on whatever happened in that neighborhood, right? Or whatever hot button issue it is. And like, you can really see it for yourself, as opposed to right now, you have, I think right now the mayor holds the police bureau and they don't talk about it, it's not really a council item, a budget's proposed. You know, I think it's messier, but it'll be more transparent going forward.
I think looking to the future, one thing that I expect to be available to us in form of government is a nimbleness at the city. So as an issue arises for Portlanders with an executive mayor, if it is something within their policy area or something within their authority, they are able to move quickly in order to address an issue. And then also have that counterbalance of a legislative council. That legislative council will be an incubator for policy ideas in the committee system to bring policy ideas that will work for Portland. They will develop them, they will examine them. Just like Robin said with a committee on community policing or community safety, there would also likely be a committee on housing and urban development. And that committee will have policy expertise on the issues that we were talking about. Then when they are bringing together policies for the council, they are the best policies and have been vetted by their colleagues and were able to move much quicker. I would hope through that opportunity. And also the nimbleness of the executive mayor to move quickly if there's a challenge facing business. They will have a smoother, not a smoother path, but they will just be able to implement strategies that are effective in order to address the needs of Portlanders in a way that our commission form really requires a lengthy and cumbersome and permission for things that are truly within your authority. You know, even if you are the commissioner in charge of water bureau, you still need to gain other votes in order to develop a policy that might be good for low income ratepayers. So it is, we're hoping and I expect that it will be a much more nimble system with clear authority for who's in charge of what.
We've heard a lot about some of the positive aspects of the change and what can go well. I'm wondering if we challenge each of you to take the opposite position in such a big experiment, things could go horribly wrong. So if that were to be the case, what went wrong?
Well, why don't we start with something that will go
Something that I hope goes right, but I think it needs, and it's part of the reform, is ranked choice voting. It is actually a proportional representation. The issue really isn't ranked choice voting. It's very popular, it very works, demonstrated for electing people into a single position, whether it's the mayor or a legislator in a single district. It's untested in a multi-member, non-partisan setting. It really is. We're heading into, we just don't know how all that dynamic, the non-partisan is going to work. I am very hopeful that that's going to work. I really do worry about the absence of a voice who speaks to, for, and about the whole city. And I hear that, each council member will do that. But just imagine if we had a governor who had no veto, no real authority, couldn't even appoint her own cabinet or bureau heads. The city manager did that, or the manager. So I think that's the anxiety that I have. The other anxiety is that we'll miss the opportunity to say there's a larger civic fabric out there where we really could begin to look at each other and say, yeah, we've got unfinished work to do here.
So, thinking about what the challenges are ahead of us, the schedule is relentless. It is an all steam ahead, probably using the wrong metaphor, effort right now. And so if we have roadblocks from opponents who are not happy with the outcome and want to spike our progress, or we're not all pulling in the same direction, I think that would be a real challenge and a real missed opportunity. So we have to be focused, laser focused, like we haven't been before, on delivering for Portlanders. And if we lose focus, if we miss, if we don't have support of our leadership and our community, that'll be a downfall for us.
I think when it comes to the next big election for the city of Portland in November 2024, it'll be incumbent on not only the elections office, the city of Portland, organizations like this one, right, just community groups to get the word out about, all the candidates we hope will run, right? And because, there's a nonpartisan label, political organization whether it's a party, whether it's issues, right? That is really important. That's a signal to voters. It's, helps us organize a lot of things on the ballot, right? That's just City of Portland. In 2024, we'll have ballot measures, presidential, all the races as well, right? So just, with a lot of races, we want to make sure, how are we getting that information out to voters so they can help sort through for themselves, right? If I'm aligned with, folks who really want to build more housing, how do I find which of those candidates represent that viewpoint, right? So that'll take a lot of our communities and our political organizations and, you name it, whatever kind of source of that community organizing can emerge. So, that's a big task, but I think that's going to open up opportunities. But again, it's a lot to manage. Who knows what the world looks like at that time when people are voting? So we hope that people have as much information as possible, but that's going to take a lot of work. But it might be our opportunity to really grow that civic fabric if we do pull it off, right?
I think we have time for one or two more questions.
I didn't vote for this measure, not because I didn't believe there was a need for structural reform, but I was interested in Wingspan's version, which seemed to be a more simplified, I think 7 districts, 1 representative each. Can you compare and contrast the components of that initiative, that proposal, the overlay on 26, 28?
There was a lot to like about it, what was not to like, and particularly just from the opponents of Measure 26-228. They just did not recognize the importance of attending to broad, equitable representation. And they tended to look at the city council as almost sort of a function of the mayor, that it just wasn't as important to have the strong city council envisioned by Measure 26-228. They did deal in the Mingus Maps proposal with districts. Now, there are pros and cons to districts, and that would help in many ways, but it wouldn't deal with the fundamental issue that charter reform did get to, with representation for historically excluded smaller portion populations in Oregon that are also dispersed, and how hard it is to really expect that they will continue to be elected. So that's my take.
To contrast, I think that the Mingus plan, the CSPAC plan, didn't appreciate how inseparable how we elect our city leaders directly impacts how those city leaders will govern. So, when we talk about 7 districts, that map drawing would be even more contentious. It could really harm certain communities. I believe there's 7 came from this idea. There's 7, City of Portland neighborhood coalition associations, right? Just like all the groupings of the neighborhoods put together. But so there's 7, that's what they put out. Those 7 are not equally populated. You couldn't draw it around that. Some are 4 times more populated than other neighborhood associations. So if they started from there, it's just like a bloodbath. And I don't know if folks have followed, Oregon redistricting, national redistricting. Those are brutal. Like people do not like gerrymandering. Whatever side of a line you and your neighbor are on could determine the kind of person that represents you. You could effectively have no representation, or no one who thinks like you on council for your area. Like it's just, that's a huge thing. The proposal also didn't appreciate the idea that like getting rid of May election primaries for the city is huge, because structurally 35 on a good year % of people turn out, and then they make a decision for all of Portland. We've moved it now to November, where at least, and you've seen it this election, at least close to 70% of the city, 80 to 85 on a presidential year come out. So we're actually hearing what the opinions of Portland voters are saying, right? And I think that benefits all of us going all the way in. So, and they didn't refer ranked choice voting as either. And if you saw the margins in the county, it got 68% support, almost 69%. Like, if anything, the most popular part of the whole package was the ranked choice voting, and that wasn't included in the means plan.
All right. I think we're good.
What a round of applause for our panelists.
Can I just say something in closing? I just also want to say how much Len meant to me in my professional career. I met him in 2006 when I worked for Sam Adams, and I owe a lot of my success to what I learned in small and large conversations with Len. He was a terrific person to work with. Thank you.
First, I want to thank our panelists. I want to thank Shane for moderating. I want to thank Robin and Shoshana and David for a really informative and I think we have a lot of work to do, and I think that there's a lot of in this room. Everybody is passionate about where the city goes, and we're grateful for your service in making that happen. I want to also just thank Len, without whom this panel doesn't happen this way, and we're really grateful for that. Thank you, Marcus, for honoring David, for honoring Len. Being that we are at the Native American Student Center, I just want to acknowledge that we are on Cayuse, Umatilla, Walla Walla, Stipumish, Cowlitz, Clackamas, Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, and Confederated Tribes of Silent Indians Land. I want to thank our sponsors, Jeff Reingold of Income Property Management. I want to thank Danelle and RD, because Danelle wouldn't thank herself, so thank you for your sponsorship. There is information on your tables about the Maccabi games. If you know a 13 to 17-year-old who would be interested in either playing sports in Israel or playing sports in Fort Lauderdale this summer, there are those opportunities. And thank you again for coming out for our business event. We should have our next one the goal is February 1st, and we'll be looking at the business of Hollywood. So thanks so much for coming out today, and thank you all for your support. Take care.